The NEA Executive Director is in the house. Buckle in.
The Dan York State of Mind program is brought to you in part by Lookout Rhode Island and Takeo Comfort Solutions.
So I got a couple of things I want to cover with Bob Walsh, and sometimes I say there's 4 or 5 things I want to cover with Bob Walsh. We don't get to them because we just beat the tar out of each other on the first 1 or 2, which is the fun of it. The National Education Association Executive Director, Mr. Robert Walsh, will join us here momentarily. Friday nights, of course, are exempt from commentary on the daily course of the news because we record our Friday programs on Thursday afternoon. Full disclosure, I say that because I don't want you to think I'm asleep at the switch on a Friday night when all heck breaks loose on a Friday afternoon, and it generally does. So we'll catch up on Monday. It also gives me a chance to kind of spread it out. And Bob and I are on often issues, friendly adversaries, and sometimes we actually agree on stuff, and that's when it gets boring. I don't think that'll happen tonight. So let me show you. Let's get done. Can we get the difficult stuff done first, if we can possibly even do that? Here is a headline from the blog Good School Hunting. This is Ms. Erica Sanzi, or Mrs. Erica Sanzi, who writes this blog. She's a former Cumberland School board member and a teacher, and she has run into an understanding and a recognition that we have loopholes in both Rhode Island and Massachusetts for a law that would criminalize a physical relationship between a teacher and a student. And there have been a couple of stabs at trying to get this thing fixed, and they seem not to be getting anywhere. Anita Buffoni put a package together on this week. Let's run that, and I think it'll give you some background.
Right now, under Rhode Island state law, if a teacher crime has been committed unless coercion or force is involved. Now there's a debate over changing that. Under the proposed bill, a new clause would be added to third-degree sexual assault, making it illegal for school employees to have sex with students. Both of the state's teachers' unions opposed the measure.
And quite honestly, we don't have an issue generally with the subject matter of this bill. Our objection is that teachers and school employees are being singled out.
Several states have similar laws. Rhode Island is one of 30 where the age of consent is 16 years old. Former educator, now education blogger Erica Sanzi testified in favor of the bill. During a taping of Dan York State of Mind, she explained Massachusetts and Rhode Island are the only states in New England without laws that protect students once they are 16.
All personnel records are confidential. So when my kid's teacher is fired for having sex with a student, I don't get to know about that. If they don't lose their state license, they can go get a job in another district. And if they do lose their state license, they can go to any state they want and do the same thing.
The Rhode Island ACLU also opposed the bill, explaining singling out teachers in this way is arbitrary.
We don't understand why the bill doesn't cover store managers or clergy. Why doesn't the bill cover volunteers of community organizations? And no disrespect, but why doesn't it cover the legislature?
Everybody should be shouting from the rooftops. It is not acceptable for people in positions of authority to be having sexual relations with the children in their care, even when they turn 16.
Now, the teachers testified that a teacher would lose their license if this conduct takes place, but proponents say it should be criminalized under Rhode Island state law. No vote was taken on the matter.
Yeah, I would be one of those proponents that think it should be criminalized under Rhode Island state law. Here's a headline that kind of set me back and a whole bunch of others. The ACLU also objects to the law as proposed, saying it's too narrow. Mr. Walsh is here to discuss this. I think we can, by the way, welcome. It's always good to see you.
Thank you. Good to be back.
I think we can all stipulate that nobody wants to see teachers and students in a physical relationship.
Correct. And whether or not the student has turned 18, which wouldn't be covered in this. And this is a serious issue. So I don't want to make light of this issue in any way, shape, or form, because you know me, I can be glib and get myself in trouble. I did watch Erica Sanzi on this show, which aired Wednesday night, and I know we're airing Friday, so I'm thinking yesterday, but it would have been 2 days ago from a viewer's standpoint. And she said 2 or 3 things that I need to address. First, she referenced, and I guess I can accuse her of being glib, that this issue came to her attention when the president of France got elected and it was noted that he married his former teacher. That's an interesting way to bring up the issue that this particular bill covers, but she had put a bill in before that. So put that in the parking lot. She also said she had reached out to us several times. I did not know what Mrs. Sanzi looked like until I saw her on your television show. I have not seen her at the State House. She has not called me, written, emailed, etc. And she must have said something years ago that ticked me off enough that she was blocked on my social media account. So I don't know who she is, other than I was aware for 2 years she was on the Cumberland School Committee and she had a brief career as a teacher. So I've never had a dialogue with Ms. Sanzi about this issue or any other issue.
My immediate reaction to that, as you can predictably guess, would be, I'd be happy to have the both of you sit here and talk this thing over.
And I don't think we need to talk the thing over because the other thing she said.
I think she's a good advocate.
No,
I think she does.
Well, I don't know if she's a good advocate because she's been remarkably unsuccessful this and did a lousy job of presenting her case, and her case didn't have all the facts, and that's the important part of the issue. She also referenced, third thing she referenced, she said, we were against a bill she put in last year, and that got my curiosity enough that I pulled out the bill she put in last year, and I looked at the bill.
And we have it.
And that was in 2018, House 7335, and she did the same thing. And for folks at home who don't know, you as an individual can call your elected officials, your state rep or your state senator, if you've got an issue that you want to see have legislative action, you can have a conversation with them, they'll put in a bill in. Those bills are in by request, so to speak. So your elected official can put in a bill to get an issue under discussion. Indeed, that's what Mrs. Sanzi did with Representative Mazikowski from Cumberland, who's a lawyer among his many other activities in life, so he would get this stuff. We weren't against last year's bill. Ms. Sanzi came on the show Wednesday night and said, we were opposed to her bill last year. No, we weren't. We didn't take a position either way because that bill was broad enough, we didn't care. Because the objections you heard this year, oh, it's too narrow, they weren't covered in her bill last year. Her bill last year, and I've got it right in front of me, it was broad enough. It said this act would make it illegal for any custodian of a child, and I will cover all the broad category, to engage in, and I'm not going to use the language because this is a family show, but essentially have a sexual relationship with a student under their supervision.
Unfortunately,
and
listen.
That should, you know.
Hold on now. Hold on. A couple things. If the kids are watching, scoot them, because they're actually, we have to use a couple of technical terms because the age of consent and current laws that exist right now require such, okay? So you're warned. At midnight, I don't really care. The kids should be in bed anyway. But
watch the second show.
Let me go back. I am not here to defend Erica. I will suggest, my recollection is that she talked about the ACLU's opposition to the bill last year. If she included you, that's fine.
She was incorrect.
She has to make a correction on that if it is incorrect. But she was talking about her frustration with the ACLU, where the ACLU suggested last year that it was too broad, and this year it's too specific.
So to answer last year's ACLU objection, what she apparently has done is narrowed the focus just on teachers and education employees. And yes, we objected to that because that singles out and stigmatizes, and unfortunately, because of her other work, it comes from a woman who has made her career singling out and stigmatizing teachers in a lot of categories. So she got on our radar with the bill this year.
And she was a teacher for 10 years.
Well, those who cannot teach apparently blog, Dan. I don't know what her background as a teacher.
No, that's
she wasn't
a 15-yard penalty.
That's right. She wasn't in.
You know how you say you get yourself into trouble on this show?
That's a 15-yard penalty. I might be in trouble with you, but the teachers will get it because the rest of her work is not favorable towards teachers, teachers union, education employees, and a lot of her commentary isn't. But that's not what this topic is. This topic's on a very specific thing. So let's talk about the specific thing in this bill. And first of all, 18 shouldn't be the cutoff. No student in the public schools should be in a relationship, in a sexual relationship, because that's what's with the teacher. And that is already prohibited under the teacher code of conduct. They'll lose their job, they'll lose their certification, just like a doctor, a lawyer, a psychologist, a social worker, all are covered by their own codes of conduct. And if they get in an inappropriate relationship with one of their patients, one of their chargers, someone under their domain, they lose their license, they lose their job, and they can't do that anymore.
Guess what?
And that's for consensual, so-called consensual relationships.
The general public understands that may be the case by script, but it's not the case in reality.
It is the case in reality.
There are many.
All right, tell me why it's not, and we can parse this.
Somewhere along the line, I'm going to get control of this conversation. The idea here is that we've got other states who have come down and wrote specific education language, and we have states that have written specific custodial language. And I'm sure that you would rather see custodial language, meaning...
That seems to be getting to a broader aspect of the problem. For the folks who might have custodial relationship with kids who aren't covered by codes of professional conduct, because there are folks out there that might not be covered by the things that are already covered: teacher certification, physician certification.
We've run out of time in
in
this segment. We'll come back and we will talk about whether that professional conduct code and that licensure issue really sticks. Stay with us. All right. I didn't expect to come back like that. I'm back like that. Did we want to play some video there? I thought we did. If we don't, that's okay. Bob Walsh is here from the National Education Association, and we're struggling over this addendum to third-degree sexual assault, which has been proposed by a Cumberland rep on behalf of education advocate and blogger Erica Sanzi, and what she would represent is a bunch of the population, and I would include myself in it, because now that I'm aware that Massachusetts and Rhode Island do not have criminal penalties for sexual relationships between teachers and students, I'm alarmed by that. The notion here, Bob, is that you were suggesting that the professional codes of conduct and certification licensure issues would when identified, a relationship as such as identified, would take a teacher right out of the system.
Yes.
Well, I'm not sure
and by
that's
the way,
case.
that's including if the student is over 18, because a lot of high school seniors are over 18 years old, and this statute does not solve that problem, but the Code of Professional Conduct does.
There's too many anecdotes out there in communities where it's pretty well recognized that Mr. Jones and Sally were at it when she was a junior and he was, 42.
And he should be fired.
No kidding. I mean, we all agree on that. But the point of the matter is, and what Ms. Sanzi is suggesting, and this is what she said at the legislature, and I think it's an important thing to point out.
The deterrent that the gentleman next to me talks about is, yes, they can lose their teacher license and they can be fired. But that just means that they jump to Massachusetts, Connecticut, New Hampshire, Vermont, or anywhere else in the country, and they're able to get another job teaching and preying on kids. We're one of the only states in the country to have it currently in this position. Most states either have a consent law of 18, so they sort of avoid most of this, or they have laws that have a specific clause about people in positions of authority with children.
Okay, so this notion that a teacher can be moved or terminated, but personnel file covers the issue, and there's a transition. Listen, there's a great amount of journalism done in Massachusetts on this, where they've been able to track that is the case. I mean, there's a reality there that you're not giving up on, and I'm not certain that your licensure, fire and never work again, is real.
If you lose your teacher certification in Rhode Island, you can't teach in Rhode Island anymore. If you lose your teacher certification in Rhode Island and you go to Massachusetts, and Massachusetts or any other state in the country fails to check why you lost your certification in Rhode Island, then shame on them. I mean, we only have the ability.
We only have the reason for the loss of certification. Where's that documentation?
The simple fact that you lost your certification sends a pretty large red flag.
But you can
to
make
all
up
other
any story as to
potential
why,
employers.
correct? You can make up any story as to why.
I cannot control what happens in other states.
Understood, but I'm just saying there is no record for the act that caused the termination.
This is now Ms. Sanzi is trying to say something in Rhode Island is a 50-state. Well, then she's talking to the wrong people. She should call up our federal delegation and try and get something going on and have a cross-certification registry or something. She keeps changing her story in the
would
testimony.
You talk to me? I'm asking the questions.
Yeah, I am talking
but I'm
to you,
asking.
Dan.
I know that.
But
I'm asking.
We're wasting a lot of time on an issue that wasn't going to go anywhere.
You can determine whether it's a waste of time. I don't think it's a waste of time, and maybe everyone else doesn't think it's a waste of time. I'm trying to establish whether or not a teacher can be removed quietly and can continue employment here or elsewhere. And I'm suggesting to you that reality exists. In addition to that, let's just talk about criminality. Do you believe, as a good and moral person that I know you are, that it should be a crime for a teacher or anybody in a direct custodial relationship with a young person, ages 14, 15, 16, 17, or 18, for
14
having
to 16 or 18. What we're talking about here, the legal discussion we're having here, and I hate this.
We all
topic,
hate it.
as
You think
hate
I
this
like
stuff.
it?
the legal topic we're having in Rhode Island, as it is in 30 other states, the age of consent is 16. You're a father, I'm a stepfather. I'm not buying it. I mean, I'm not comfortable with that concept. Just, I'm old school enough.
You and me both.
I'm not comfortable with that concept.
Great.
But that is the law on the books. So what we're talking about is carving out what sort of exceptions exist to that law. The bill that went in last year, which talked about anybody who has a custodial relationship of anybody under the age 18, I don't have an issue with that, and we didn't testify against it. I still have an issue that many high school seniors turn 18 while they're seniors.
Amen. I was in March.
Right, you're March, I'm April, so we were 18
right.
when we were high school seniors. And I still think it's absolutely a violation of a code of conduct and a cause of being fired and loss of certification if a teacher would be involved with any student. And this law doesn't get
all
there.
All I'm asking you is
this
to extend your disgust to say it ought to be criminal.
But let me talk about what it means to make anything a felony. I heard some of your callers, I heard, throughout the week as this issue was being discussed. Because this is a felony, there's also a duty to report related misdemeanor charge. And remember, this is hard to discuss because we can't envision it because you put yourself in the situation. What would I do if I found out that my kid was in something like this? And again, I don't believe that coercion leads to consent, even if the student involved believes they've consented to the relationship. If that student goes to a counselor, that counselor under this law, immediate duty to report to the police. Without any extenuating circumstances, without any backstory, without anything. Then it's out of my hands. In some ways, it would be easier for me to support this. Then it's the criminal defense system. Union doesn't have to get involved. Let the lawyers. But you know what happens in those cases, in those he said, she said cases? And this is why you don't see the Attorney General in here talking about this issue.
Well, we're asking.
You didn't hear?
Come.
Yeah, well,
no, we're working on
that. Maybe that should have been the order of this stuff. Then they settle them out because nobody wants to testify. Because in he said, she said cases, when there's consent involved, people say,
I'm not worried about
nothing happened, nothing happened.
Listen, I'm not worried about...
they keep their job anyway.
I'm not worried about the execution of the case. I'm worried about the criminal charge and conviction. That's, how that comes in a plea or whatever.
But no. I'm saying exactly the opposite, Dan. There will be no conviction. There will be no conviction. It's easier from the union standpoint to get rid of someone in this situation under the existing structure, losing certification, losing job for inappropriate behavior, than to get a felony conviction.
How many teachers have you jammed gotten out of this jam?
Out of this jam?
I mean,
I have never dealt with a teacher in this jam.
In Rhode Island, period. In all your years?
In Rhode Island. I am sure that has happened. Before I came to NEA, and I was at NEA in 1992, there was a teacher who actually married a student, and it was a widely known case at the time, and people would recognize the name, and he got involved with a student and actually married her. They had a kid. They eventually got divorced, and that was a very well-known case at the time. I don't remember, because we have consent laws for marriage, too. So there was... they must have needed either parental consent to get married, because she would have been under 18, or they waited until she was 18.
And again, this is the word that we...
And it was totally inappropriate for him to have that relationship. I stand by that.
Just remember, the current version that identifies educators also talks about the term penetration, and penetration is a sticky issue, right? But here's the thing. Under 16, Rhode Island and Massachusetts law allow for touching, fondling, and all of that to actually occur between a majority and minority aged person. And that stuff has to be worked out too.
I think
we got to work that stuff out.
Ms. Sanzi called and characterized that. I don't think that's true.
No,
I think that's still a violation.
I think the Attorney General's office is looking for interpretations.
Yeah, I think that's still. I think that's wrong.
My readings of Massachusetts are actually
and that's not even
consistent with that thought. So look,
that's after the fact.
Bottom line, because I want to have another fight with you if we have 3 minutes left. Don't you think it would be important for esteemed labor officials like you to at least have a workshop with the folks who are concerned about this and see if we can come to some kind of law, because there are some 30 states out there who've already addressed this matter specifically and have laws.
No, I think it's the opposite. I think 30 states have an age of consent of 16 and haven't addressed this matter.
Well, listen, Indiana, Texas,
that's 2 states.
Michigan, off the top of my head, and things that I have read so far. I'm ballparking here. I'm spitballing here a little bit, but I've read the language that talks about educators specifically, custodial relationships specifically. There are different ways to skin a cat, but right now we have a loophole that needs to be addressed. Do you agree?
I think that there's an important dialogue about what the age of consent could be, and last year's bill seemed to be more in line with something that we would...
But then we should work on that. All right. On contracts to extend. Evergreen, we call it next.
We don't call it.
This particular headline reflects a new momentum for extension of current contracts for unions, including educators, and it's primarily a teacher union bill.
Support staff, municipal employees, it covers maybe 20,000.
What it says is, and you'll be quick to tell me if I've got this incorrect, and super quick, can't come to terms, a deal's for whatever reason, a deal expires, the terms of the deal extend until a new deal is written.
Yeah, it's a little more than that, but it mimics the law that was been on the books since 1967 and was practiced until 2007.
In good times, I don't think I'm concerned about this. My problem is that in times of recession, in times of limited funds, in times of trouble, local officials need to have some management ability to be able to say, listen, we're going to cut some teachers or we're going to knock your pay down. No one wants that.
They can still cut teachers under this bill. The layoff or restriction provision goes right away. Pensions are not governed by local level. That comes from the
salaries.
State. Salaries would be frozen under this bill until a new package was negotiated.
So it seems to me that in the rare circumstance that is necessary, I think that another management right is being stripped away here. If times are so bad that it is advantageous for you not to get a new deal under this particular provision, you wouldn't have to come to the table. That's the argument.
You
tell me why that's not true, and you've got the minute.
Yeah, it's absolutely not true
seconds.
Because it makes sense. What we'd want to do in negotiations is get a deal, and deal usually involves raises or other concessions if there's literally no money on the table. The simple way for management to push the issue in the horrible budget situation you just outlined. But remember, communities have to budget exactly the school budget they had the prior year plus $1 at least every year. So there's a maintenance of effort requirement under the law already. So you're working with a
fixed costs put pressure on that.
Right, and other fixed costs can put pressure on that. Usually there are enough teacher retirements in any given year in every given system.
I got 30 seconds, unfortunately.
That there's a savings from replacement, new teachers replacing those teachers that retire. All that said, the poison pill that management already has is say, we're cutting program, we're cutting staff, we're cutting this, and that's how we're going to save the money unless you come to the table and deal with us.
So you think that's the answer?
No, I think that's how you get the pressure to get a deal. Gotcha. We're trying to stop East Providence from happening.
I will have Mr. Walsh on the radio next week on this, I promise you, because we got a lot to talk about. It's always good.
We do.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Like yours on
so we're still talking about it.
Yeah.
We're still talking about the other thing. But I will tell you, the superintendent of the state police is scheduled for our Monday program. I'm not sure he'll want to tackle this particular matter, but he's got a lot on his plate to perhaps readjust the culture of that fine organization. And we'll talk about that on Monday. In the meantime, you have a great Palm Sunday weekend. Holy Week next week. Good night.